finally here. I think I ordered it November 3rd, something like that. So it's been almost 8 months, but it's finally here today and I'm excited to check it out. Oh wow, this was open. Oh, the handle came off too. No big deal, just I guess it got a little roughed up in shipping. So here's the box that comes in the shipping box. You know, I actually kind of think they shouldn't brand this box, I would think, just because there's always a chance if they leave it outside or something like that that someone will see it, and then if they want an electric skateboard. So here's one box. Batteries. Charger. One charger and 2 chargers. Here's the board. So here's the remote. So here's the backpack. Comes with some manuals. So here it is. The board is really solid. It's a very thick board. It's definitely good build quality. It's hard to get this kind of build quality with a DIY project. I guess now I just got to charge it up and see how it performs. I'll probably have to do that tomorrow. Acton definitely did a good job with this board. I'll mostly focus on what I liked about it, which is plenty, and gather most of my criticism and suggestions for later. The build quality is very good. The deck, trucks, motors, and electronics enclosure are all solid. I'd almost say it's like a skateboard tank, mostly in a good way. I really like the pattern on the bottom and the grip tape design. I live in California, so the bear on the grip tape is especially nice. It has a long wheelbase for its size, which helps it feel stable, and there's plenty of clearance under the board thanks to the low-profile battery and electronics. I used this fishing scale to weigh the board. Mine weighs in at 15.92 pounds. The specs say 15 pounds. I guess they generously rounded down. So I'm outside with the S2 now. I'm going to ride it for the first time. You can see that I've never ridden it before because the wheels will never be this clean again. Let's see how it does. My first impression when riding this board is it has plenty of power and is exceptionally smooth and quiet. Here I'm accelerating to full speed and then braking hard. The motors are very quiet. The sound of the wheels rolling seems louder than the motors. The hub motors also roll very well in case the board or remote ever die on you. The trucks also turn well. However, I'm not such a fan of the Kicktail, but more on that later. It does pretty well on sidewalks. The 83mm wheels help getting over bumps. The strange thing that happened just a few times is when going full throttle, it feels like one wheel occasionally slips and the board pulls to the side just a bit, but it wasn't very noticeable. So I put the board in Pro mode, and now I'm going to do a speed test on this street here. I'm going to go in both directions just to make sure it's the same. I test my other electric skateboards here, so it'll be interesting to see how it does. It's a smooth road, so that's good. So this is the westbound direction. I'm going to start in this direction. All right. facing the eastbound direction now, and I'm going to see how fast it goes in this direction. In this test, the battery was just fully charged. I did some random tests later when the battery was less charged, and it was pretty consistently around 18 miles an hour, which matches the specs. So I'm at the hill where I test most of my electric skateboards. I'm gonna see how fast I can go up this hill. It's pretty steep. It's not that high of a hill, but it's pretty steep. It's not easy doing this. All right, I'm at full throttle. Gotta look for cars. I'm gonna go up a second part of the hill now. I'm at full throttle. And that's pretty good. So now I'm rolling back down the hill. Just coasting right now. A little bit of brake. Braking. Make sure no cars are coming. Now I'm going down the steeper part. Braking a little. If I brake full, I can slow down pretty good, just a few miles an hour. Now I let go. In my previous shortboard video where I used 70mm motors, I went up the same hill and the board slowed down to about 5 miles an hour on the steep part. However, after switching to 83mm motors, the performance was much closer to the S2. I'll make a video showing that build soon. For the range, I didn't have a chance to fully test it. I only had a chance to ride for about 5 miles at a time, but the board was always fast and seemed to have plenty of charge. In the owner's manual, it says the battery is 36 volts and 4.4 amp hours, or 158.4 watt hours. A rule of thumb I've seen used by electric skateboard builders is approximately 1 kilometer of range for every 10 watt hours. This would equal 15.8 kilometers, which is 9.8 miles. That basically lines up well with my experience on a typical ride with a similar board that I built. I think the 14-mile range that's advertised is definitely on the optimistic side. With range, it's always tricky to predict because it can really vary a lot depending on factors like how many hills you climb, the roughness of the pavement, rider weight, wind, whether you manually push start, how often you stop and start, basically anything that makes it more difficult for the motors. The board is easy to charge, and while I never timed charging it, it seems to always be back to full charge in an hour or so after my rides. According to the owner's manual, the charge time is 2 to 2.5 hours, which seems correct. Overall, the remote feels good and has a solid build quality. I like the rubbery texture, and the switches and accelerator both feel well made. The remote has maintained a good connection to the board, and I never had it cut out on me while riding. It does seem to occasionally fail to pair with the board when I first turn it on, but turning the board off and back on has always fixed it. I've never used the reverse. I'm really not sure why it's useful. Maybe for doing tricks. Maybe you can do a 180 slide and flip it in reverse and keep going backwards. You may have noticed I didn't mention the app yet. That's because I was saving it for this part of the video, the criticism. The app is not so great. I wasn't able to create an account or log in using the app. The only way I was able to finally log in was using Facebook, which I didn't want to do.
What really bugs me is you can't use the app at all without logging in, and so I wasn't even able to switch the board out of beginner mode until I could log in. There's just no good reason to require logging in just to configure the board. Not to beat a dead horse, but it also took a few tries to get the app to connect to the board. For me, the most important features are setting the board in Pro and Beginner mode and turning the front and rear lights on and off. The app does have a decent UI though, and provides some good information about the board. Hopefully Acton will continue improving it. This leads me to my next point, the remote. The biggest issue I have with it is that the batteries aren't rechargeable. Yes, you could buy your own AAA rechargeable batteries, which I did, but having it be USB rechargeable, like on this one, would be nicer in my opinion. The remote would also be a great place to put a switch for beginner and pro mode, so maybe the app wouldn't be needed at all. I know apps are a big thing now, but I don't think an electric skateboard really needs one. I write software, so I definitely understand how difficult and time-consuming it is to write good apps and properly test them. I think Acton's resources might be better spent by adding more features to the remote instead of an app. If I want to track my ride or see how fast I'm going, there are plenty of apps for that. Maybe adding a switch on the board to turn the lights on and off would also be nice, or put another switch on the remote. I understand it's important to be visible at night around cars, which is why I usually take a flashlight with me when I'm riding at night, but there are times when you don't want the attention of a glowing skateboard. Getting back to the built like a tank thing, this board is built very solid, maybe a bit too solid. At almost 16 pounds, it's not so easy to carry. I'm sure the team at Acton spent many hours contemplating the design of this board. Maybe using a thinner deck, lighter trucks, and a plastic electronics housing could have helped shave a bit of weight off. While the metal cover for the electronics looks very nice, I'm concerned how it'll hold up. Every time I get to a high curb, I'm so careful not to risk scraping the bottom of the board along the pavement. I'm guessing that was one of the reasons other boards like Boosted Board went with plastic. Now about the kicktail. When riding this board, the thing that threw me off, literally, was the kicktail. At first I thought I would get used to it, but I really couldn't. The wheelbase is very long and the kicktail is very short. Even when I try to place my feet in the correct position, it isn't easy. When I'm normally riding the board, I just couldn't easily turn. I think this might have been a design choice to avoid people flying back on the kicktail when accelerating. It might be okay for some people, and it's definitely better than nothing, but if you're switching from a regular skateboard, you'll probably be wanting more of a kicktail. So I know I just ranted a bit, but this really is a very nice board. I still need to ride it longer though to see how durable it is and how it holds up on longer rides. My experience with Acton support was very good. While I was making this video, one of the chargers broke. After I opened a support ticket, someone got back to me the next day to confirm my shipping address and immediately sent out a new charger. To me, the best feature of this board is definitely how quiet and smooth the acceleration and braking are. It's a good looking board too. I think the questions now are, does it meet my expectations? How does it compare to other boards? And is it worth the price? For the first point, I would certainly say yes. This board does live up to its advertised specs and is a lot of fun to ride. The second and third points sort of go together and is kind of difficult for me to answer. Most of my experience has been with boards that I've built. I've ridden a boosted board once, but don't have much experience with other pre-built boards. The S2 is cheaper than most popular boards like Boosted, Evolve GT, or the Inboard. The main difference is the S2 is a bit slower and maybe has less power than some of those boards. I think the S2 has comparable build quality, so it's really going to come down to preference. A top speed of 18 to 19 miles an hour is plenty fast for me, and I didn't have any issues going up hills, so in my opinion it's a great option if you're looking for a well-built board that'll save you some money in exchange for a bit of speed and power. As of now, the S2 is selling for $1,000, compared to around $1,300 to $1,500 for those other boards. That being said, there are other cheaper options that might come with their own trade-offs. It's worth doing some research to see which board really meets your needs. There are boards like Coup Wheels or Genesis that have dual hub motors that are in the $500 range. The Juiced board is another example, currently running an Indiegogo campaign that's $800 for a dual hub motor version. The Juiced board is particularly interesting because it sort of looks like they took the motors, trucks, and remote of the S2 and the deck of the Boosted board. So this guy I passed on the bike lane was asking me about the board while we were waiting at the light. The first thing he asked was, what's the range and how much does it cost? I agree those 2 points are very important. He guessed around $1,000, so I guess that's good for Acton. I told him he could build a board for less money if he was inclined. As I was finishing the sentence, he was already telling me he's not inclined. I then told him I think he could do it if he wanted to. That takes me to my final thought, and another thing to consider when shopping for an electric skateboard. Is it better to buy a complete board or to build one yourself? There are so many great resources available now that it's continually getting easier to build one. I won't lie, I lean towards building one, but I realize it's not for everyone. I was one of the early backers of the S2 on Indiegogo, and I only paid around $550 for mine, so I definitely have no regrets about my purchase for that price. As an electric skateboard, I would not hesitate to say this is a great board. It would be much easier to recommend though if it were in the $800 range. To anyone who watches this, I'd like to hear what you think of the S2, or other boards, or if you think it's better to build a board. I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.